I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
This is Snake Envy.
And I'm Clint.
We are very grateful to be here with Clint of Clint's Reptiles.
Well, since we learned about DNA and taxonomy, how much has that changed our thought process, and what have we learned from that?
That's a good question. So, I would say that the main thing that it has done for us is it has made it much easier for us to tease out the difference between homology and analogy. Homology being similar traits that are due to shared ancestry, like say the basic body form of a snake, versus analogy, which are similar traits that are due to similar selective pressures, like the features shared sort of among various legless lizard lineages. Even though they're not actually closely related, there are some similarities that they all have just as a result of being legless. And it can be difficult to know which ones are due to homology and which ones are due to analogy. And in the past, we basically just had to pick a whole bunch of characters almost at random and just kind of mark down if they had them or not. It was almost purely based on morphology. And we would just try to take the simplest explanation. Now that we can use DNA, we still do that. We still do that with physical features and things. We still look at the fossil record to try to back up what we're seeing in the DNA. But we have another line that is a lot less biased by what is conspicuous to us. Right. And so in a lot of cases where we had done a pretty good job, because we've had phylogenetic systematics since long before we were using DNA to do it, especially before it was affordable and reasonable to do it on a large scale. In a lot of cases, we probably were pretty accurate, but in some places we got tricked by analogy, and so it's just an added tool and probably the strongest single tool that we have, and so it has shifted around a lot of things. But then probably there are a lot of things that also have stayed very much the same, and we now just have more confidence that we were accurate about those things.
Just kind of, yeah.
I saw an interesting conversation online recently. There's often debate about taxonomy. There's often people who say, "Oh, come on, you got it wrong." Yeah. I saw an interesting one about rattlesnakes. So the timber rattlesnake, one of the localities and one of the common name differences is canebrake in the South. And there are people who believe it's not just a locality, that they're different enough that a canebrake should actually be a subspecies of the timber rattlesnake. Now, of course, there's other people who go, come on, it's just a common name difference. One's darker than the other, but they're the same snake. How are taxonomy decisions made? Is it somebody does a scientific paper and there's a peer review process? Is there a governing body in Geneva, Switzerland? How are these decisions made, and how are they rectified if there's controversy?
Well, there's always controversy. So making decisions about like what is a species, what is a subspecies, what's a locality, these are largely going to depend on how you're defining what those things are in the first place.
There's always a starting point.
Life doesn't work in discrete boxes like we would like for it to work. We're trying to put it into discrete boxes. And really there could be a near infinite number of discrete boxes for any given lineage. And so it's really difficult. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to have anything that I can actually defend as being objective, I'm going to have some criteria. It has to be this amount different from any other population around. And then if it's that amount different, I will consider it a unique locality. And then I'll have a more difficult threshold. If it has this amount of, say, genetic separation, then I'll say it's a subspecies. There's subspecies. If there's an even bigger amount of genetic separation beyond a certain threshold, I can call them unique species. If it's bigger than that, I can call them unique genera. I'm just trying to salvage these Linnaean categories.
Right.
You know, and there's actually a species concept, which is just the phylogenetic species concept, which essentially is if you're a totally unique lineage and, you know, nothing else is quite like you, then you are a species.
You're a species.
You know, and species are really messy. You know, I think the species concept that people resonate with the most easily is the biological species concept, which is essentially if two organisms can breed and produce viable offspring, then they're the same species. But that makes a lot of intuitive sense. It's really difficult to apply in practice. Because, you know, for example, if I've got two animals that, say, are super closely related, if I brought them together, they could breed and produce viable offspring, but they live on different continents. Are they the same species or different species? Because that's never going to happen that they're going to breed. You know, like as soon as I take a koala to the San Diego Zoo, has it become a new species? You know, that's difficult.
And Jason, as a breeder, knows full well that hybrids are possible.
Oh, and crazy hybrids.
Yeah,
hybrids you would never
Natural
expect
hybrids,
to happen.
Yeah.
You know, you can breed corn snakes and milks. You know, it's crazy stuff.
But then even in like the wild, the range overlaps. There's integrated.
Oh, yes.
integrates.
And you know, and that's the thing is when two populations split apart, they have to stay apart for a very long time before they will be reproductively isolated. And then, you know, then not even to mention, I mean, you got ethical problems like, are chimpanzees and humans the same species?
Yeah.
Well, you better not find out about that. Are you know, if I find two skeletons of tyrannosaurs, are they the same species or not? Like, I have no idea if I could breed two skeletons of tyrannosaurs together. Were they the same species? Is every single tyrannosaur a different species? Those geckos over there, those are mourning geckos. They're all parthenogenic. Is each individual a different species?
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got all kinds of problems where it's really difficult to put that into practice.
So once there's a question or a debate, what's the process?
So essentially,
and who decides ultimately?
you will lay down your criteria for how, this is probably how different it needs to be. These are my criteria. And based on those criteria, I think that these have met this threshold, and I will write my paper, and it will go through peer review. But that's not the end of it. Peer review is relatively simple, right? Like the peer review process of getting it published. Once it's published, that's when you get to find out if everybody else thinks you're an idiot or not. You know, like hopefully that got caught during the initial peer review process, but now all of your peers can review it for real. And if it's like, well, you didn't set the bar nearly high enough, or the way you ran this study doesn't match what you said there, then all of a sudden you're going to have a real problem. And what's probably going to happen is you're going to do your study. Other people are going to go, hey, but you know, if they can't really poke a big hole in it, or if other studies start coming out that are in agreement as they examine it possibly in different ways, after a while it becomes sort of the consensus that, yeah, that probably is a unique species. But you see them go back and forth. You know, all of a sudden the newest paper has this as a unique species, and then it's a subspecies again, and then it's back to being a species.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Pluto being demoted as a planet.
It's all going to depend on your criteria for what is a planet.
The debate will never end.
As you know, I'm a Pituophis guy, and so
Me too. I love that.
And I love the species, and I love working with them. And I just wanted to know, like, where did this tree start? Where is the start of this family start? Like, can we break that down, or is that
the Pituophis? Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Let's just dive deep on Pituophis because it's something that we're all in love with, and I think we might find a couple things here that people are going to find interesting, if not a little controversial.
yeah, I love this group, but I have long had questions about, you know, exactly what is a gopher, what's a bull, what's a pine. You know, I have some of those things a little bit ironed out in my head, but I haven't really had a good chance to sit down with the phylogeny and really see if there's any rhyme or reason to that.
We're also going to show some examples of the snakes as we go. So, Pituophis is a genus. So first off, what is a genus?
So a genus is the next Linnaean category above species. And so it's a group of species.
It's the box that contains similar species.
Yes, it is the smallest box that contains multiple species.
Okay. And we've got a few of the visual indicators of Pituophis. So we have enlarged rostral scale. That's that upturned scale on the front of the nose that helps them to dig. We have a modified epiglottis, and the glottis is that tube in the mouth that the snakes breathe through. And
modified for making a
modified for making that vibration as they hiss.
That's cool.
Which is often compared to a rattlesnake rattling its tail. And all species in the U.S. have 4 frontal scales instead of 2. And we actually have an example of a northern Mexican pine where you can see that delineation. The ones in Mexico have different head scales than the ones in the U.S.
And this is something I want to comment about.
Yes.
So all of them that we observe have 4 prefrontal scales instead of 2. However, if one member of the lineage lost 2 of those prefrontal scales, it wouldn't stop being Pituophis. And that's a place where I think a lot of people get a little bit confused. Like for example, if you have a lineage of monkeys that loses its tail, there are 2 tailless species of macaques, for example. They don't suddenly stop being monkeys just because they don't have tails. And so in the same way, I can generally identify a macaque, and a monkey and a tail would be an attribute I would look for. But just because it loses the attribute that I usually associate with the group, that doesn't mean that it stops being a member of the group. You can't evolve out of the group.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that over time you can't say, well, pull this one out.
Yeah, the only reason you would pull it out is if the entire rest of the group is more closely related to one another than they are to that one, especially if that one is more closely related to other stuff that I don't consider part of the group, then it can't be part of the group without including that other stuff too.
So we are going to put the taxonomy on the screen for you so that you can pause it, you can take a closer look at it, but just for the sake of our discussion, we're going to have Clint roll through each of the species that are in Pituophis and the subspecies, and then we'll kind of discuss each one, whether we think any of these are interesting, something we didn't know going in, or whether we think there's a little controversy among us as to whether they're in the right place.
That sounds good. 9 subspecies of Pituophis catenifer. I've got 2, which would be a form of gopher snakes.
And we have 2 examples here. So we've got a Great Basin gopher snake, which is Deserticola. We have a Kankakee bull snake, and all bull snakes are considered catenifer sayi. Now, among the 3 of us, we were talking earlier, one of the interesting things about catenifer, which is the gopher snakes, is that I think we overcomplicate in discussion about them the relationship with bull snakes. But based on the taxonomy, and you guys can see it on the screen, it's actually pretty simple, isn't it? Bull snakes are gopher snakes.
Yeah, they're just right in the middle of that group. What I have a bigger problem with is the existence of gopher snakes at all.
Really?
Yeah. So we will...
Based on what?
Based on their phylogenetic relationship to each other. The fact that bull snakes are Pituophis catenifer would just mean that they're just a gopher snake. In fact, there are other gopher snakes. Like you got these, what are they? The Crotos Island gopher snakes. You've got, and you got your Cape gopher snakes. And so the bull snakes are more close to, if this was all phylogenetically accurate, just this list, then being part of catenifer, the bull snakes are, they're smack dab in the middle of the gophers. They're more closely related to all of these other 8 subspecies than they are to these Crotos Island gophers or the Cape gophers. That's if this was phylogenetically accurate. But, you guys let me take a little peek at these phylogenies the other day, and I can't find one that's very clear. It's really difficult to read these. So hopefully the one on the screen you can read. So I'm really having to look at things. It's difficult. But I've got 2 different trees, two different phylogenies. I think they're from the same publication. One of them is Bayesian and one of them is maximum likelihood, which are just different ways, statistical methods of figuring out which is the best one. But so just looking at this big one that we have printed out here, which I think is the maximum likelihood phylogeny, there are 3 different groups of Pituophis catenifer that are not one another's closest relatives. In other words, Pituophis catenifer, not a thing. It could be one of those three things, but it can't be all three of those three things unless you're going to include all of the other species, the currently recognized species, that are more closely related to any of the other catenifers than the catenifers are to one another. So catenifer is not a thing. It's probably one of the three, but not all of the three. Then on top of that, so let's see. This is actually going to be really useful because it'll tell us. So here we've got more gophers. So the Cape gophers are part of that group that has all the catenifer in it. And let's see who.
So that would be in that group.
Yep, so that would be in that group. So I would have to include the Cape gophers in there if all the catenifers are going to remain catenifers. Then the Cape gophers would also have to be catenifers. Let me make sure that's accurate. That actually, given this tree, I can't tell because I got a polytomy here. A polytomy is where I've got three groups and I don't know which two of the three are most closely related. So if it turns out that this group and this group are more closely related to each other, then they could potentially stay Cape gophers. Let's see, the other tree I think has that resolved. So, according to this tree, the Cape gophers and this higher lineage here with the smaller group of Pituophis catenifer, they're closer to each other than either of them are to this. So, yes, the Cape gophers would need to be catenifer also if we were going to salvage catenifer.
Okay.
And then I've got, let's see here, who are these? So, according to this one, I've got, what do you call it, Sei?
Yep.
And Sei, who are they?
Those are the bull snakes.
But that says
No, but this is,
that says Ruthenii. That's
oh yeah, no, that is catenifer. It says catenifer Sei. Okay, so yeah, bull snakes, I'm fine with that. But then I've got, Ruthenii? Who's Ruthenii?
That's a Louisiana.
Louisiana pine
It's
snake.
Louisiana pine.
So
which
the
is
Louisiana
off by
pine
itself.
has to be not only a gopher, but it has to be catenifer. If we're going to save this whole catenifer group. And after that, okay, and then Lineaticolis. Did we already tackle them?
Nope.
Nope. So that would be, they have no accepted name according to this. What do you call them?
This is one of the weird ones because Gibsoni and Lineaticolis, they are ones that don't really have accepted common names, but they're found in Mexico.
The furthest.
They're the furthest southern range of gopher snakes in Mexico. They're generally accepted to be gophers, but some people refer to all the Mexican species as pines. This is where Pituophis becomes a little more complicated.
Yes, the Mexican subspecies.
The Mexican subspecies.
Well, it's not as complicated as we'd think, at least according to this phylogeny, because Lineaticolis would just be catenifer.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Which honestly,
Gopsoni
I
I'm
think
not seeing.
we would think that makes sense, that they would just be gopher snakes.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing Gopsoni on here.
They're rarely. It's a fairly unknown species. They're barely in captivity.
So they might not have been used in this, or it might just be too
There
difficult
might
for me
not
to
be
see.
enough data on
So I don't know, but if I had to bet money, I would say they're catenifer.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
I would too.
And so let's see who that would put in catenifer. So obviously all of catenifer. We're trying to salvage all of these as being catenifer. Apparently that's important to us.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna do that, then we also needed to include Cape gophers, which I don't think will upset anybody too bad.
No.
They can still be called Cape gophers,
That feels
And they're in Baja,
right to me.
California.
but their species name would need to change. And because they would just be a subspecies of catenifer. And then and so we've got them, and then who else do we
We need to break down the depii.
Depii is another Mexican variety. So in Depii, Clint, typically these are referred to as Mexican pine snakes. This would be an example of a northern Mexican
That is so
pine.
beautiful. I've seen these before, but not for a while. That is so beautiful.
And then there's also just a Depii, which is typically referred to as a Mexican pine snake. And then you have a Depii jani, which is Hidalgo here. And this would be a northern Mexican pine. But when we break it down in terms of the phylogenetics, what say you?
It can be a pine. So here's the thing. Depi and Melanoleucus are different things. There's no reason either of them need to be part of Catenifer.
Right.
Correct.
One of them,
Though some people think these should be gopher snakes.
one of the two could be included, but the two phylogenies are telling different stories. So what I need is more data
Okay.
to build a better phylogeny. Depending on which method I use, it's showing it in two different ways. So, but at the end of the day, one of the two pines could be, you could lump it in with Catenifer if you wanted to, or it could be a whole separate species, because it's all of Catenifer that we have just salvaged would be more closely related to one another than they are to Depi or Melanoleucus. But so I can include them or exclude them. The way I usually phrase that is they're the hagfish of Catenifer in this case.
So let's finish up with pine snakes.
Okay, so pine snakes, they can be a thing, but both of those can't be pine snakes. Because one or the other of them is more closely related to your gophers than it is to the other pine.
Okay.
And you're talking about the black pines and the northern pines and the Florida pines. Or
Yeah.
are you talking about this guy?
I'm talking about both of them.
Both.
Those two groups are not each other's closest relatives. That's the thing.
Yeah.
One of them is more closely related to the gophers.
Which I suspect would be the Depii.
The Depii.
Just-
I agree with that. I think
mean-
these are more likely closer
Visually,
to gopher snakes.
But like we know that visually is not always correct. So
Well, and their relative location seems
Yes.
like it fits that Catenifer band
It
a little
does.
bit better.
Now, what
and
is
they're
your
closer,
opinion?
They are closer to this.
Yes.
So if it were me, probably what I would do, if this was totally up to me, one thing is I could tease out a few different kinds of gophers. I could have Catenifer gophers, and then I could have say that we decide that Depi is the other gopher. I wouldn't lump them in with Catenifer, but they'd be a different kind of gopher.
Yeah.
And then I would have Melanoleucus, my pine snakes.
And the last question, do you agree with the Louisiana pine snake being separate from all the other true pine snakes?
So I don't know if it is even on here. Okay, so according to this one, it's super not a pine snake. Let me double
a
check.
gopher
It's a gopher. It'd be smack dab in the middle of our Catenifer group. Let's look at this one. Oh yeah, no, it's sister to say in both phylogenies. In fact, I'd need to get a better look. There might not be a difference between those two things. They might not. I don't even think they're sister. I think they are the same thing.
And based upon geography, it would make sense for a Louisiana pine to be a sei, to be a bull snake.
It's close.
Well,
They live right next to say
I don't think they're yeah. So it's Catenifer. That's it. If bull snakes are Catenifer, then it's Catenifer for sure.
it blows me away, but it's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think for a lot of people out there, we're going to blow some minds. And this is what we wanted to show people. We wanted to show people the difference between the typical taxonomy that we always see and discuss, and then taking it a step further with the phylogenetic taxonomy. It's a completely different story.
And the thing is, this is based on actual
Genetics.
genetic relationships. It's based on their historical relationships. It's based on
Right.
It's not just based on me taking a total stab at it, just based on some stuff I happen to notice.
It
Which-
should be much more accurate.
And I should mention, I could make probably. I mean, what I have here is I have like 5 unique groups, 4 to 5 unique groups that could all be called different things. The reason that I'm calling most of them Catenifer is just because that was the only way to keep all of Catenifer in Catenifer. What I really need to do is Catenifer needs to be split up about 2 or 3 different ways, and then I have 4 or 5 different groups. But as it stands right now, I've got 3 groups. I got this gigantic Catenifer group that again could be broken up into multiple groups, and then I've got Depi, which could be a gopher, probably.
I think that's the conventional wisdom, is that these should be considered gopher.
But they don't need to be Catenifer at all. There's no reason to make them Catenifer.
They're definitely different.
And then Melanoleucus would be my pines. That is assuming that this phylogeny is correct and not this one. I just need a little more data to tease that out.
And then in Clint's perfect world, maybe the Louisiana pine snake is a sei.
Yes. Oh, I mean, it could be a sei. It's definitely the... Well, I mean, looking at this... Yeah, I mean, some of them would be. I need to see what these are a little bit better. But let's put it this way: the bull snakes come out of the clade of the Louisiana pine snakes. So bull snakes are more closely related to
the Louisiana pine.
Some of the Louisiana. Well, okay, like this Oklahoma locality one, it looks like, but these look like Louisianas. I'm just, this is hard to read. So some of the localities of Louisiana pine snakes are more closely related to bull snakes than they are to the other Louisiana pine snakes. So the Louisiana pine snake, that would be a type of gopher, and this is why it's subspecies and stuff. Trying to salvage these discrete categories is not all that useful, because I would need to. The remaining Louisiana pine snakes some of them are more closely related to bulls than they are to the other Louisiana pine snakes. So I need to have multiple Louisiana subspecies, and then also the bull snake, which would be a subspecies also of whatever I decided to call that. And that's within my bigger Catenifer clade. And this is the problem: is there's not a discrete number of differences that can vary wildly. And so the hardest thing is trying to salvage the Linnaean terms in a world that understands that things don't work in like 8 discrete categories.
So I don't know if we cleared things up for you. I don't know if we just blew your minds and totally confused you, but please let us know in the comments what you think. What do you think about some of the things Clint just said about the Louisiana pines? Are you comforted in knowing that bull snakes are actually a lot simpler than most of us talk about them? They are simply gopher snakes, no different than a San Diego gopher is. Let us know in the comments what you think. Thank you very much, Clint. We appreciate it.
That was fun.
Be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.